in the name of personal injury law.
No one wants to think about being in a car crash, and it would be really terrifying if it happens, but it's better to be prepared and know what to expect. So today we have personal injury attorney Steve Sinas with the Sinas law firm, and he's brought with him a guest who has a lot of experience with car crashes. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks for having me, Lisa, and I'm very thankful for my guest here appearing, my friend and local police officer, Steve Whelan. And Steve is coming on the show today because he has his own personal experience with car accidents. He's investigated hundreds of car accidents, and so he knows a lot about what it's like to be in a car accident, and we want viewers to get a better idea of that in the event that they or their family members are ever in one. So, Steve, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And let's start. So, if you are in a high-impact crash, what kind of sensory experience are you going to have in terms of the sights, the sounds, the smells, the fears?
First of all, it's completely overwhelming. The noise, the everything is just completely overwhelming. And if airbags go off in the car, sometimes you can smell almost a burning smell, and that adds another element of fear. In reality, that's just usually the airbag.
So what should a person do immediately at the scene when there's been a serious car crash?
So the first thing is to assess the injuries in the car, you or your loved ones, and see kind of the status of where everyone's at, how everyone's doing immediately. Then also you want to call 911. You want to notify people as quickly as possible that you need help.
What will the 911 dispatcher ask when you call in?
One of the first things they'll ask is the injuries, because that will dictate the priority of the police and fire response. And then after that, you're going to want to know where you're at, okay? Because cell phones, they don't always know where you're at. So it's really good to give as much cross-section of what roads are. Lastly, they're going to want to know what other cars are involved and kind of the big picture of the crash.
So when the police arrive at the scene, what should people expect in terms of what they're going to do at the scene, who they're going to talk to, how they're going to talk to you if you're the person in the accident? What should people expect about the police coming to the scene?
So the first thing a police officer is going to, at least they should, come in and block off traffic to protect the scene, to protect all the people in the cars. We encourage people, if they're injured, to stay in the car, just because you don't know the amount of injury you have.
You're safer in the car?
Right, especially in a severe accident. So then the police officers are going to block other cars from coming to that area. They're also then going to assess your injuries. They'll come up and ask the injury situation. Then lastly, they're going to be gathering information on your driver's license, your registration, your proof of insurance.
Will they be talking to witnesses and other people at the scene?
Right, especially in a more serious accident, independent witnesses are really, really important. So if you have the crash and somebody comes up and they say that they saw it, encourage them to stay there.
So what if the vehicle is disabled? Are you, the person involved in the accident, supposed to call the wrecker, or the police help take care of that?
So it determines how big of a road situation is. If it's on a large road like Saginaw or Grand River, the police officer will assess if there needs to be tow trucks hired or not, and if there are, then they will usually order those up. It's not a situation where you'd call your own in a big road like that.
What about the belongings in the car? Should you take those with you, or will you have a chance to get them at a later time?
Again, it depends on how big of an accident it is or how big of a crash it is. The larger the crash, the property is not the priority. The smaller the crash, you'll have time to be able to gather your things and make sure you arrange with your wrecker what you want to do with that stuff.
If you can't get your belongings at the scene, who should you call the next day or later on?
The police officer will give you a police report number. That'll have all the information from the other driver, from you, all the witnesses. It'll be the full investigation. In there, we'll list which records have the cars. And again, sometimes when people are taken off to the hospital, they don't know any of that stuff. And then that accident report will have complete information. Otherwise, you can call that record company to find out about your belongings.
So when it comes down to a situation where someone's seriously injured and there's a reason for an investigation to go on, what should people expect in terms of the police officers maybe reaching out to them? Maybe they're in the hospital. Maybe it's their loved one who's in the hospital, and the police are calling and want to talk to them. Does that type of thing go on?
Depends on the severity, again, of the crash. If it's a very, very serious situation, there will be a full investigation. There'll be a full scene drawn of the area, a lot more interviews, a lot more investigation will go on from that. In a basic crash, you probably won't be called again, but that police report number is really critical for you to have to contact that police department so you can get your full report.
Are there times when the police actually go visit people in the hospital because they need to talk to them, you need to get their statement about an accident?
Especially when you can't talk to the police officer at the scene and you're taken off to be evaluated at a hospital, then the police officer will do their best to go to the hospital and talk to you there.
So, Steve Sinas, what should people do to protect their legal rights following a crash? Should they be immediately contacting an attorney for help?
Well, Michigan's no-fault law makes some, for some various types of claims that can be complicated. So sometimes people think they can go it alone, but they should really think about how they need to protect their legal rights, what's happened to them in the crash. If there is another driver that caused the crash, they're going to have a claim against that at-fault driver. Potentially, they need to investigate. They have various claims they can bring to their own insurance company. So if it was my loved one, I would strongly advise them to get an attorney who knows what they're doing when it comes to this area of law. There's a need to take action because there are a lot of different timelines that you have to abide by. So it's important to think about representation, think about whether you need it, and then you need to think about who is the best attorney for you. And that takes a good amount of investigation in of itself. So these things can be overwhelming in the beginning, but if you comply with the investigation with the police officers, you get your own attorney and get your ducks in a row, so to speak, your rights are going to be better protected.
And that's how I met Steve.
Yes.
In my own sphere.
And I'm glad you recovered from your accident. I understand it was quite an ordeal, but having gone through that experience, I think it gives you a different perspective on the scene, doesn't it?
Very much so. Very thankful. My wife and I are doing very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was an honor to represent Steve and his wife. And when we first took in their case, we thought that they weren't going to have as many troubles with their insurance claims, and they actually did. So it goes to show that you need to really protect your rights, and it was an honor to help Steve and his wife, and thankfully we were able to resolve their claims. So,
thank you to both Steves.
In the Name of Personal Injury Law is brought to you by the Sinas Law Firm.